two-sentence introduction strategy. And before we do, I want you to look at something. Look at these questions. Do you struggle with writing your IELTS introductions? Do you spend more than 3 minutes writing your introduction in the exam? Do you feel you have to write something clever to get a good score? Or do you have to memorize introductions for different kinds of essays? Well, if you answered yes to any of these questions, you have a problem with writing an introduction. You have an IELTS introduction problem. Hi, I'm Ben Adams and this is IELTS 7.Guru, and today we're going to solve your IELTS introduction problem. Because here is the truth. You can write clear and effective introductions with just 2 sentences. You can do this on nearly any IELTS topic or any type of IELTS question with this simple strategy. I call it the 2-sentence introduction strategy. And this is exactly what it sounds like. You only need 2 sentences. Just 2 sentences. That's it. Hang on, Ben. I've read lots of books that say I need to paraphrase the question. Do I need to do this? No, you don't. In fact, for most of you, for many IELTS students, trying to paraphrase the question is probably a waste of time. In fact, it's not just a waste of time. It's a terrible idea. Why is this? Well, let's try to use the paraphrase strategy and see why it actually is a problem for many people. If you want to use the paraphrase the question strategy, you need to know a number of things. You must be good at synonyms and using alternative expressions or writing things in different ways. You have to be able to change the form of the words. For example, if you want to write, if the question says pollution, maybe you can write polluting or polluted. And you also have to be able to change the word order and to spell the different words correctly. This is a lot to do. In fact, this is very hard. Most IELTS students cannot do this very well. And if you can't do something well, you're using your time badly and you're probably going to get a worse mark. Here is a typical Task 2 question about being overweight. Now, if we want to paraphrase this, we've got a lot of work to do. Let's have a go. So we can talk about more and more instead of increasingly. We could talk about many or lots of people instead of large number of people. We can say obese or fat instead of overweight. We can say think instead of believe. We can maybe use need to or have to or another modal verb instead of should. We can use mandatory instead of compulsory. And maybe we can write something like physical activity instead of sport. But most of you would find it difficult to do this. And most of you would probably spend a lot of time trying to do this. Okay, so we're following the strategy and we've changed lots of words. And what do we end up with? Well, maybe we end up something like this. More and more people are obese, so some people think universities need to make physical activity mandatory. Okay, it's not bad, it's an okay sentence, but we had to change lots of words. So instead of this, what should you do? Well, you need to use the 2-sentence introduction strategy. So let's try the 2-sentence introduction strategy and see how this works instead of the paraphrasing strategy. If we write a 2-sentence introduction, it would look a bit like this. Recently, people have been worried about the number of overweight people. The question is, should universities force all students to do sport? Do you see the difference? It's much easier. We have changed very few words, but it's actually a complete introduction and it's not that difficult to write. So how does the two-sentence introduction work? How can you do this in an exam when you're under pressure and you're worried about your time and you're worried about doing a good job? Well, it's actually very simple. You only need two sentences. The first sentence is about the underlying issue or the actual problem or the thing people are actually worried about. Every question, there is some worry, there is some problem, or we would not be talking about it. Every question, there is a problem to discuss. Sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's less obvious, but there always is something we can say. 2, write a question. And the great thing about writing a question is that at the end of the essay, you will answer your question. So your coherence is quite good. You have a really clear start and you have a very clear end. So you can do this with any essay. Well, let's practice this a little bit. Let's start by looking at the first sentence. Sentence 1. As I said, the easiest thing to do is think, what are people worried about? And for the other question, the question about overweight people, people are worried about the number of overweight people. And here are some patterns you can use instead of writing it the way we did. So you could say recently, you could also talk about these days. As you can see, there are different ways to do it, but the main idea is at the end, there is some issue, which is a noun, like unemployment or the environment or pollution or something like that. Now you also can notice that recently and these days have a different verb tense. So recently we can talk about have been or have become, and these days we talk about the present. So we can say are or are becoming or something like that. It really does not matter. The main thing is you have a clear sentence that you can practice and that you can use really easily for many kinds of topics. Let's take a look at sentence 2. Remember, we want to ask a question. So the best thing to do is ask direct questions, because direct questions, you don't need to change the word order. So remember to use the question is, comma, and then write the question. Keep the comma, that's very important. So we've got some examples here. We could say the question is this really a problem? Is this a good idea? Should we do one thing or should we do something else? Or what should we do about this problem? So you see how we can ask questions for different kinds of essays. For example, should we do X or should we do Y? That could be two different points of view. Or what should we do about it might be solving a problem. So there are many ways to do it, and there are many other questions you can ask. Okay, now let's show you the two-sentence introduction in practice. Let's try this on 2 IELTS questions so you can see how it works all together. Okay, here's one question, and this question is from IELTSLiz.com, so the link is on the blog post and you can follow it to IELTS Liz if you like. She's got lots of great questions. Happy to give her credit for this. Okay, so here's a question that she has. Most societies have homeless people. Some people think the best way to help them is to give them more money. To what extent do you agree? Okay, well, what is the problem? What are people worried about? What are they worried about? Homeless people, or people with nowhere to live. If you want to paraphrase it, what kind of question could we ask? Question: is giving homeless people more money a good idea? Now let's put it together into an introduction. Recently, many countries have become worried about the number of homeless people. The question is giving them more money a good idea? And you see how this doesn't try to paraphrase the question, but it's similar, and some of the words are the same. But remember, there are only some ways to say things. There aren't that many ways to say homeless people. The best way to say homeless people is homeless people. So there's no point trying to paraphrase things a lot of the time. Okay, let's try this with another question. Question 2. This is a different kind of question. It's also from IELTSLiz.com. Again, it's in the blog post. So here's the question. With an increase in the number of privately owned vehicles, roads are becoming more congested. What measures could governments and individuals take to deal with this situation? So this is This seems to be quite a complicated question, but again, we can ask, what are people worried about? Well, what do you think? Traffic congestion on roads. You could write traffic jams, you could write other things as well. And what question could we ask? Well, I've already kind of asked a question in the question, but we can make our question a bit simpler. What should we do about it? That looks really easy, but that is fine. And so we end up with, recently, many cities have become worried about traffic congestion on their roads. The question is, what should we do about it? That is a great introduction for this question, and it doesn't take that long to write. So now it's time for you to take action. So I want you to look at the 4 sample questions on this page and write your own 2-sentence introductions in the comments below. And I'll make an effort to reply to your introductions. If you write a good introduction, I'll let you know. If you can make one that needs a little bit of work, I'll let you know too.